today, Michelle and I are going to be talking about shame and guilt in the context of ending a relationship. So I'll just introduce myself really quick and then flip it over to Michelle. I'm Kara. I am a divorce coach primarily. I am also a divorce attorney and mediator, and I am also a divorce survivor. So I've really seen divorce from all angles, and I work with my clients in different ways at all stages of the process. How about you, Michelle?
So I'm Michelle. I am that millennial therapist. I'm your go-to relationship therapist and dating coach for high achieving millennials. And I help millennials across the entire relationship spectrum, from breakup or divorce and finding yourself again, to single and looking for your person, to deepening the relationship that you have with your partner. And I do that through masterclasses, group programs, one-on-one coaching, and online courses.
Amazing. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of clients and plenty of issues around ending relationships in the work.
Oh yeah, across the entire spectrum. I mean, from breakup to divorce, kids, no kids, pets. There's a lot that goes into it, whether it's something that you want and feel like, okay, yes, this is the right thing to do. This feels like the right thing to do. Or if it's something maybe you didn't want and it's what your partner wanted. There's so much that goes into it. So I'm excited to kind of go through and talk about some of these themes around shame and guilt that come up when you are ending a relationship or marriage or any type of relationship in any form.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, that it can come up whether you're initiating or on the receiving end. And it shows up in different ways. And regardless, I think, these emotions are very, very powerful and can definitely have you feeling stuck. So I'm excited to dive in. Just for everyone who's tuning in live, we're going to talk for about maybe 20 minutes or so. Feel free to drop any questions you may have in the comments, and if we see them as we go along, or we'll take some time before we wrap up to answer any questions. But otherwise, let's just kind of steam ahead, full steam. So Michelle, I would love for you to maybe share just like a little bit of like your personal experience with shame and guilt in the context of ending a relationship.
Oh, gladly. I actually was the one who, I've been in back-to-back relationships from age 15 through age 26. I'm 31 and married now, but from age 15 to age 26, I was in back-to-back relationships. And I was typically the one who ended them, though I was in a relationship where I didn't want it to end and the other person ended it, and it was devastating. So I definitely have personal experiences with being on both sides of it. And while the experiences of it were very different, the feelings were similar, right? Like the guilt I felt breaking up with someone who didn't want the relationship to end was like, ugh. And then breaking up with someone in my later 20s, there was like a lot of shame. There was a lot of doubt. Like, should I be ending a relationship in my late 20s? I'm going to like start over and be single in my late 20s. Like, that feels really scary. So there's so many, I feel like I've experienced in my personal experience, so many different facets to it, and so many different angles in both situations where, again, the feelings were very similar. Like, I felt guilt and shame in both, being the breaker upper and the one being broken up with, but the context of the feelings were different.
Yes, I think that's such a good point, because the emotions and the feelings, I think, show up in our bodies the same way. But perhaps our mindset around them depends upon the context that we're in and kind of the thoughts that we're kind of thinking. Yeah, I mean, similar to you, Michelle, I kind of suck at being single, to be honest. Not for lack of trying. I've tried a few times in my life, but similar to you, I was, in back-to-back relationships, high school, college, married my college boyfriend, and then hit my 30s and decided that that relationship wasn't serving me or fulfilling me in the way that it needed to happen, or either of us, if I'm being fair. And yeah, I had to take the step to end that relationship. And guilt and shame, oh my gosh, like the thought of starting over in your 30s, especially after you got married to this person, it was paralyzing for a while, for sure. And I think it it's helpful to get really clear on what shame and guilt really mean, like get like define them, so to speak. So from your perspective, Michelle, how would you define each of those?
Totally. So I always tell my clients that shame says, I am bad. So it's part of your identity, where guilt says, I did bad. So you don't necessarily feel like you're a bad person, but you feel like you did something bad. Mm-hmm. So shame is actually our lowest emotion because it is so personal. It is so internalizing when you feel like you are a bad person or a bad human, versus guilt, where I actually encourage my clients, or when they're starting to feel like going from shame, like I am bad, to, okay, maybe I'm not bad, but I still feel bad. Like I feel like I did something bad to someone. I'm like, this is great.
Great job, client.
So when you're feeling guilty and you previously felt shame, just know that even though they're two awful feeling emotions, that you are healing and you are moving through. So those are kind of the differences between shame and guilt. And again, if you've ever experienced the shift between shame and guilt, just know that was you processing and healing.
Yes, I love that. Shame, I feel definitely is, like you said, it's that lower of the two. It is definitely a lower frequency of energy, and it is more personal. It's this idea that I'm unworthy in some way, or I'm not deserving of anything better. And I think another like primary difference between the two is that shame doesn't really motivate you to do anything because you just kind of inherently believe that you are not a good person. Whereas guilt can be a motivator. So like if you do something and you feel guilty about it, it can motivate you to learn, to grow, to make different decisions so that you don't feel that way again. So that's kind of the positive spin on guilt. And another thing that I find interesting, and I was reading Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart before this, just to really refresh myself of what these emotions mean. And she said something very interesting, that for those of us who struggle with perfectionism, which can also rear its ugly head if you're ending a relationship. Hi, I'm Kara. I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Hi, Kara.
She had this great quote, Brene Brown, and it said, if there's perfectionism, shame is lurking, which basically means because perfectionism is always externally based and it's always about doing things to make you look better to other people. And so it's interesting to kind of think about how all of these things are connected to each other.
Oh, definitely. And off of that point, which I love so much, I think when, especially like later in life, late 20s and on, when you choose to end a relationship, it can feel like I failed. What's wrong with me? Why couldn't I make this work? Mm-hmm. And I can see how that would tie into perfectionism, right? And like seeing relationships as this place, or the success of a relationship as this place where it gets to feed into that idea of perfectionism, when really relationships are some of like the messiest, most ideal places to be human.
Yeah. And, you know, I think hand in hand with that is people tend to think that longevity equals a successful relationship or a perfect relationship. And so if that longevity is taken away from you, right, then that's where the shame can come up again, because you're like, well, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? Like you said, that this doesn't continue. And I agree with you about that.
Can we shout it from the rooftops? Longevity of a relationship does not equal relationship success. I'm sure I'll speak for you for a moment, Kara. I'm sure you know many people, just as I know many people who have been married forever, and you are miserable.
Yeah.
Is that safe to say?
Yes, 100% safe to say. And I think it just speaks to the power that these emotions can have over us. And so I'm curious, just in the work that you do with your clients, how do you find that shame and or guilt tends to hold them back from moving forward?
So it was interesting. This kind of popped into my mind when you were talking about shame and guilt, and you know, thinking my own personal experience, but also my clients' experiences. I find that shame seems to be the more dominant emotion when you are the one being broken up with. And guilt seems to be the more dominant emotion when you are breaking up with someone. Because I think when you're on the receiving end of a breakup, it's so easy to internalize it.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? Why don't you want me? Feeling unworthy, feeling like the feeling of rejection, right? I think that all plays into shame a lot more. And it's interesting. I had a breakup survey to help guide me. I have an online breakup course. So I had a survey of 70 people take this breakup survey. And I asked, like, if you could put on a spectrum, what scenario felt worse, like being on the receiving end of the breakup or being the breaker-upper? And while most people acknowledge that they're both painful and they're very different, being on the receiving end was significantly more painful just because of that shame and that like feeling broken that someone doesn't want you. Whereas I feel like when you're the breaker upper, it's that guilt where I'm causing someone pain and I feel really bad about it.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way to frame each of these emotions in the context of a breakup. And I think too that it also comes down to whether or not you perceive to have power in the situation. So if you are being broken up with, it can feel quite powerless, that there's nothing you can do. Even if you make all of these overtures to your significant other, like, don't do this, I can do this, I can do this, we can save this. It feels powerless because the other person holds the control because they're the decision maker, so to speak. And I think too, that's why sometimes guilt does reverberate at that higher energetic frequency, because you do feel like you're at choice, at least in that situation. And I think helping clients reframe the clients who are on the shame side, reframe that to realize that they do have power, they do have control in this situation. It just may not be what they initially think.
Oh my goodness, I could not agree more. And like really learning how to reclaim yourself and reclaim that power and find that worthiness within yourself again, because it does get so shattered after being on the receiving end of a breakup. And just really learning how to reframe it, like you said, of, okay, well, this is how it is. This person doesn't want to be with me. That's out of my control. Where can I start to see this as, okay, well, if they don't want to be with me, I don't want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with me.
Exactly.
And it can take some time to shift into that, because the breakups are super devastating, and any type of divorce, relationship ending, very devastating. But once you start leaning into that and really feeling into that, I think it can really help facilitate that reconnection with yourself and your inherent worthiness.
And yes, I love what you said first and foremost about accepting the reality of the situation first, right? This is the reality that I am operating in. I may not like it, but that doesn't mean I don't have choices. That doesn't mean I can't reclaim my own power and do what feels best for me in this situation. And I also want to add, as the person who initiated their divorce, it is possible. I know, like you said, and I agree with you, normally you feel guilt if you're the initiator, shame if you're the receiver. It is possible to feel shame as the initiator as well, because even when I was going through mine, I was like, what's wrong with me that I can't be happy in this relationship? Why can't I just be happy, right? It was very much focused on myself. And so it was that combination of shame and myself and guilt that I was making a decision that was going to cause pain to another person. And so it's interesting how to kind of differentiate between the two. And it's hard to do that when you are in the situation. It's easier to do it either in hindsight or as an outsider.
Definitely. Oh, my heart. I love that you touched on that too, and that how the two can coexist for sure and be in the same space.